Hey Jeff, how are you doing?
Good.
Good.
I want to make sure that the camera's all enough for you, so
It's kind of a problem, sorry.
thank you for joining us today. The hiring committee in this room and the people across New Mexico have any concerns about improving New Mexico. We're looking for a person who is best qualified to represent us. We'll go through a series of questions. You'll have 2 minutes to answer these questions, and you'll be warned within 15 seconds of that answer. We'll keep doing that. The first question. The state auditor's role is to ensure the proper use of taxpayer money by auditing and examining the financial affairs of every state agency as well as state contracts. What makes you believe you're the most experienced and qualified for this job?
Well, my qualifications go back to my small business experience. Of course, I grew up here in Albuquerque and am an Albuquerque native, but as to qualifications, when you're writing and signing both sides of the paycheck, you kind of understand how the importance of money is and really how that dollar moves throughout your own small business. I got into politics not because I ever thought I would be running for office, but because I got upset with the way the city of Albuquerque was treating me. I felt like that they weren't following their own policies. So I got that job on Bernalillo County Commission, served there for 7+ years as a Bernalillo County Commissioner. And when the opportunity to become state auditor came along, I felt like that was a great opportunity for me to really get into what I got into government for, and it was transparency. And I'll tell you right now, my job as state auditor, I call myself the Chief Transparency Officer. And that really describes what we do. We go in, we fact find in every agency, over 1,300 of them, on an annual basis. So there's 1,300 agencies that we review. We also do special investigations. That's where we go and we look at those compliance issues. We look at the things that, the policies that are being followed or whether or not they're being followed. We analyze each one of those. And we then report back to the governing bodies and to the public. So my background is in transparency. It was the first thing I did as a Bernalillo County Commissioner. I believe that the public has a right to know what we're doing and whether or not we're even following the laws and policies that your governing bodies have created. That's why I'm most qualified, because I have experience across the board in making sure that the budgets work and making sure that the processes work in this state.
Second question. Are there any audits you would recuse yourself from because of close friends, business ties, or other conflicts of interest? Can you give the committee some examples of times that you've gone against your own political party?
Well, I'll give you the last first. Most recently, some of the announced audits that I've done are audits of ARP, the art system here in Albuquerque. We've been working on that to determine how in the world do you finish a $125 million project when you're missing $75 million in the funds? How do you get that thing to completion? That was the R.J. Barrett administration. That isn't the Tim Keller administration. So that's a Republican I looked at. Alamogordo just recently, it was all Republicans down there. We looked at some LEDA uses of funds. Those are funds that were used to build a family fun center. And there were a number of problems with what they did. Not the least of which the chaotic procurement process that was just crazy. But then again, I was dealing with Republicans in that case. I'll also throw out the RCLC, the Regional Coalition of Land Communities. Now, why is this something that I bucked the party or went against the party on? Well, the most important part of that audit was that we were receiving a lot of pressure to get it done prior to the primary. From both sides, quite frankly. We need this audit out. The audit wasn't ready to be released before the primary. That is just the fact of it. And I will not sit on an audit. I will not hurry one along. It will be released at the time that it's completed and not before. I have to go out and look at myself in the mirror, and I won't use the office for political gamesmanship. And that's how I show my independence. I'm also sad to say that one of the first people to ever endorse me for public office was Mayor Chavez in Tijeras. And unfortunately, I regret the fact that I had to initiate an audit, a special audit. We found a lot of things wrong with the village of Tijeras that we worked on. So I don't really find myself in a position where there are a lot of conflicts for a lot of different reasons. But we also have a number of firewalls within the organization. A lot of the work, a lot of the audit work, in fact, most of it is done by independent public accountants. And so we are not somebody that manages every one of those audits or performs those audits.
Thank you. The past audits have found irregularities in New Mexico's high-risk pool and a company owned by 2 state political officials. This audit has started by the prior auditor and has been continued by you, and both at the high-risk pool and at the company level. If you're the auditor moving forward, will you continue to push the state and private financial and tax returns for both agencies to confirm that the following following companies are following state regulations?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the problems that I've found since becoming auditor December 1st of last year is that there are a number of these JPA organizations, or in this case, this is a statutory organization created by the legislature as a 501c3. Under the Audit Act, if you are created by the legislature for a legislative purpose, and you use the power of the state of New Mexico to fund your organization, you are, by definition, a state agency. You're an instrumentality of state, and you must be audited annually. Not just your financials, but for compliance with state law. That means all of the procurement codes across the board. One of the things that we found is that a number of these problems, the RCLC included, are because of the fact that these entities were not audited prior to my administration. And there are a number of those entities that kind of fly under the radar. And I kind of refer to them as leaks in the financial system. Another audit that falls into that category is the Non-Metro Area Agency on Aging, the NMBC. It had never been audited for compliance. And this particular agency moves millions of dollars. It's about $18 to $20 million annually into programs around the state to feed seniors in senior centers, from Roswell all the way up to China, from Las Cruces to Farmington, everywhere but Albuquerque, as a matter of fact. And they were out there doing $8,000 parties at Hotel Honolulu's with the money at a time when everybody was seeing a 5.5% cut in 2017. This is an agency that needed to be brought into compliance in their audits, and it has to be done annually. And I will continue to find and ferret out these organizations as your auditor and reveal what they're doing with your money, because any dollar that didn't go in that particular case to a senior, if it went to a meal over at Hotel Honolulu's, that's a dollar that didn't go to feed a senior in the state, and that's tragic.
Next question. There's been a lot of scrutiny and controversy recently over the foundations and nonprofit organizations that receive tax dollars or otherwise are tied to tax-funded entities. The UNM Foundation being an example, funding for expensive trips as one example. Some say that these nonprofit agencies are not government agencies, so they are not under the authority of the state auditor. What's your position on this issue?
We have to look at the structure, and I kind of touched on this a moment ago with the structure of the New Mexico Medical Insurance Pool. In the case where you have a nonprofit entity that's created by the state, let there be darkness. Hello. Hey, everybody. In the case where you have a structural problem with let me back that up again. If you have an entity that is created by the state for a state purpose and receives state funding, it is a state entity for the purposes of the Audit Act, all right? That is just rule number one. If you have a completely private entity, I can think of one off the top of my head, Albuquerque Economic Development, which has its own board, it has its own revenue, and it may receive some funds from memberships from local governments, but it operates privately, it was structured privately, it was created privately. That's a different issue. But when you cross over like the UNM Foundation did, and you start commingling funds, you can't take a private dollar and put it into a public account and say later, oh, well, that dollar is now private again. Once you have moved it into a public account, all of the rules, procurement rules, mileage per diem, all of them attach to that dollar. Unless, of course, it's been specifically exempted by the legislature. They know how to do that. They've done it in a few cases. The Medical Research Park Act gives specific exemptions from state law, but it doesn't mean that the nature of those dollars are any different.
Thank you. In 2 minutes or less, please tell the hiring committee why you believe you're the best candidate to represent New Mexico as state auditor.
Well, I think you start out with my adherence and my full belief in transparency, and I touched on this in the first question a little bit. As the Chief Transparency Officer, I believe that it's my job to push out information to all of you, first and foremost. I work for you. I am somebody that, well, for example, I do not answer to the government. I do not answer to the legislature. And that kind of makes some of them mad. I hope we don't have any legislators. Oh, I see Senator White back there in the back, and maybe in trouble. I do not answer to them. It's my job to answer to you, make sure you know how this works. I have a demonstrated track record of embracing and expanding upon transparency. As auditor, one of the things I believe that we should do is move all of the state sunshine pool work over to the OSA. You require an independent auditor, not somebody that is tied to every elected official from one party or the other in the state. That's not me. And even if it was, I've shown that my independence, my sense of honor, my integrity will demand that I audit everybody, friends, families, or otherwise, if they are out there, if one of these cases comes before me. I've shown that I can do that with independence and fairness. That is the job of the state auditor. You can't be tied to everybody in the state and expect to have audits that are meaningful. And that's what this job is about making sure you know how your governments are acting, making sure that you know that they're in compliance with the law. And for the legislators out there, making sure that the bills that you pass or the policies that you create in your local or state governments are being followed by those who are tasked with implementing it. That's what I'm committed to do. I have a history of doing that both as a Bernalillo County Commissioner and as your state auditor. I'm not asking you to believe what I'm telling you. I'm asking you to look at my 10-month record, and it's pretty long for someone that's only been in office for the last 10 months.
Thank you, Wayne, for coming today. And the hiring committee and the voters of New Mexico will let you know on November 6th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.